So again, thank you everyone for being here. We're going to be discussing tips and strategies to reduce food waste at home. We were going to be joined by Hamadi from RISE to provide live interpretation of the webinar into Somali, but I think something has come up for him, and I hope that he is okay. My name is Lisa, and I work with OCRRA, the Onondaga County Resource Recovery Agency. OCRRA and the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, or NEWMOA, partnered on a project to create tips, especially for new Americans, to reduce food waste at home and keep food waste out of the trash. Krishana Ibrahim Petrie from NEWMOA is unable to join us today, but I'd like to recognize her effort in helping prepare for and host today's workshop. I would also like to introduce Peter Ricardo of the Food Bank of Central New York, who helped us with the food demonstration that we'll see later today. Before we continue, I'd like to review some quick housekeeping over Zoom. It looks like everyone has made sure that you are muted. In your control panel, you'll see a little microphone icon, and you can click that to mute and unmute yourselves. You'll also see a chat bubble, and in the icon, chat bubble icon in the control panel. And at any point during the workshop, please feel free to add any questions in the chat, and we'll address them during the question and discussion session at the end of the webinar. Lastly, we are recording today's webinar, and it will be available on NEWMOA's website in the next week. Before we continue, and Peter Ricardo has included his contact information in the chat. Before we continue, we're going to do a brief survey to help us understand your food use habits. You should see a poll option shortly pop up on your screen, and just take a few minutes to answer those questions. This is the part where I feel like I need the Jeopardy theme to play. And I apologize for this. I need to stop my screen share just to get. There we go. Find that poll. All right. So it looks like we've got a range of folks going grocery shopping between more often than twice a week and once a week, and most folks either using their trash can or backyard compost to dispose of extra trash or extra food. So let's get back to sharing the screen. So why does food waste matter? 30 to 40% of food is wasted nationally, and every time food is wasted, money, labor, and other resources that go into producing the food is also wasted. In the US, an estimated 25% of fresh water use is wasted producing food that is never eaten. Some instances where food is wasted is beyond our control. Droughts and other natural disasters can destroy entire harvests. The first step to food loss is to prevent those causes. Food is lost along all stages of the supply chain from farm to plate. Some of the reasons are that before harvest, crops can be lost to pests, bad weather, overplanting of crops, or a shortage of farm workers to help with the harvesting. And after harvest, a large portion of produce is discarded because it does not meet consumers' expectations for size, shape, color, sweetness, or flawless appearance. When food is processed and packaged for sale, edible parts such as skin, peels, and fat may be trimmed and discarded. And grocery stores often try to keep the shelves full at all times, even if it means stocking more food than they can sell before it spoils. Lastly, restaurants tend to serve large portions, which may not be fully consumed in one sitting. There are ways that we are in control of how much food we waste. So food is also wasted at home. In Onondaga County, 21% of the trash is food. Some of the tips to prevent food from going to waste: you can buy only what you need, meal prep and plan, save vegetable trimmings for soup, stock, and pesto. And we created a series of short animated videos to help convey these tips and strategies. We were planning to show them in Somali, but since everyone here speaks English and since we don't have our translator with us, I will go ahead and play those in English. You can also find the links directly to them in the chat. Let me just get those pulled up here.
The federal government estimates that.
All right, we need a new share. Click over here. We're going to share the sound. And this full.
Almost 40% of the federal government estimates that almost 40% of food produced in the U.S. is wasted every year. That's equivalent to 125 to 160 billion pounds of food wasted. It's not just food that's wasted, but also the water, labor, energy, and money used to make the food and get it to you. Here's what you can do to help end food waste. Meal plans are a great way to use what you already have and keep to your grocery budget. The whole family can create it together. When deciding what to eat, save space for leftovers or have them for lunch. That way you won't end up throwing away any food. Use your grocery list to prevent any impulse buying so you only get what you really need and save money. At home, save veggie peels and scraps by freezing them to make stock or broth. You can also use scraps for pesto and salsa. Taking these small steps makes a huge difference, both for our wallets and our planet. Try them out now, and together we can end food waste.
So those are a lot of the main kind of preventative tips. Another really important aspect of this is that food stores and consumers regularly throw away food that has passed its sell by, best by, or use by dates. And date labels are really manufacturers' recommendations for peak quality and generally have nothing to do with food safety. Often foods are perfectly edible after their so-called expiration date. You'll see the same introduction in this next video. However, new content about date labeling will follow. So let's go back to
the federal government
new share. Here we go. Let's get that into the whole screen. Okay.
The federal government estimates that almost 40% of food produced in the U.S. is wasted every year. That's equivalent to 125 to 160 billion pounds of food wasted. It's not just food that's wasted, but also the water, labor, energy, and money used to make the food and get it to you. Here's what you can do to help end food waste. It's important to understand what date labels on food packaging really mean. Date labels usually help stores decide when to sell items, not tell people when to eat them. There are no rules for how these dates are set. The use by, sell by, best if used by, and other dates are determined by the manufacturer. Date labels are not related to food safety and don't always reflect the true condition that food is in. Date labels are not regulated by federal or state laws, except for infant formula. When the date on a label has passed, the food can still be safe to eat. This can result in throwing away perfectly good food because the date label has passed. A better indication of whether food has spoiled is by its condition. Most foods are still high quality and safe to eat for some time after the date on the label. Examples include yogurt and cheese, over 7 days past the date on the label, eggs, over 3 weeks, canned or boxed food, over 3 months. It's safe to cut off mold on low moisture foods, like hard cheeses. Be sure to cut at least a 1/4 inch away from the moldy area. However, high moisture and porous foods like soft cheeses and bread should not be eaten if you see mold on them. Whenever possible, compost food that cannot be eaten. Ask your local waste agency for how and what to compost. Test your eggs by placing them in water. If they float, they are bad. If they sink, they're good. Store new food behind what you already have to make sure you use up older food while it is still good. It's safe to drink milk until it starts having a bad smell. Remember to trust your senses when determining if food has gone bad. Taking these small steps makes a huge difference, both for our wallets and our planet. Try them out now, and together we can end food waste.
So now we're going to transition to a food demonstration by Peter Ricardo of the Food Bank of Central New York. Peter is the production donations manager of the food bank and will be demonstrating how to use food scraps in a vegetable chili and how to properly cool and thaw those leftovers.
Hi everybody, I'm Peter Ricardo, Product Donations Manager and Chef at Food Bank of Central New York. We're going to talk about making some vegetarian chili today, keeping in mind utilization, what we call utilization of product. In other words, we can approach chili if we think about it more like a vegetable stew with a Southwest or Central American flavor spectrum. That's really what we're talking about. Chili is so acceptable of variations and substitutions that it's a great recipe to keep in mind, or method I should say, to keep in mind for when you want to use all that product that maybe is languishing in your fridge. So what we're using today, I've got some whole vegetables out here. You might notice this onion, for instance, that has started to sprout. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's just getting a little bit aged in the bag and it's going to start to sprout. There's no preventing that. But certainly usable. Also the pepper was, this was pulled out of retail because of that little spot. Not a problem. We'll get rid of that. Keep a compost container on your table while you're working. Where's that onion? Again, a sprouted onion. We're going to go as close as we can and save that little green bit. Very, very shallow cut on each end. On the flower end, which is that fuzzy root end. I'm sorry, the root end. And then the flower end, which is where the sprout was coming out. Put those trimmings in your compost. Excuse me. Then We're going to cut right from the north to the south pole, we sometimes say. And you'll see a better example of that. Root end of the onion and the flower end. The root end is going to keep this onion together for however much you want to cut it. These skins I'm putting in my compost container, but you could put those in stock. It'll add a little color. Great use for it, but at the very least, let's get that in the in the compost container. Now you'll get in a lot of these older onions, you'll get this where it's partially starting to turn to paper skin there. Very carefully, I usually give it a little bit of a cut like that, and you can peel just part of it off. You don't have to lose that whole layer. Again, stock or compost for that. Then you do what we call a radial cuts, and you're going to go in the onion like so. Make a few cuts longitudinally, but look, it's still one, it's just an onion, still holding together. Now you can cross cut it without the thing falling apart. So when you're done, all you have left is that little bit of a root piece. Stock, compost. What else? We've got where's that pepper? So you want to get rid of, obviously, the part that's gone off. It's going to get moldy. Cut a fairly generous bit of that out, and then it's compost. Now there's a million ways to cut a pepper. As many chefs as you have, there's that many ways to cut a pepper. Personally, I like to cut off the end, and then you can cut what I call the shoulder of the pepper like so. And this is if you're just in a hurry and you want to be quick. When you cut those shoulders off, you'll see those segmenting bits of membrane that you can trim, because now you can see them. So boom, I'm just going to go in and trim those, and then you get that centerpiece, which is all done. Compost. Now you've created some flat bits of pepper. Pepper skin, believe it or not, is extremely tough, and it contributes to dulling your knife. So you want to always cut with the skin down. Make some cuts that way, cuts crossways. And if let's say I want a half a pepper. No, I'm going to cut the whole pepper up, and I'm going to take those cut up bits, we can take those into a multiple use container for the freezer, like so. I like to put just a little bit of vegetable oil and mix it up a little. In that way, it breaks apart more easily if you want to have this be sort of a general container in the freezer that you might not use 100% of it. You can go in and get a few, quarter cup for an omelet or whatever, but that's in the freezer and keeping you in good shape there. These portobellos were in the markdown bin, getting a little tired. Far from bad, they're just not 100%. So hold it firmly, a little light pressure, and you get the stem. The cap, they're so beautiful, large. I'm going to put a little vinaigrette on this, let it sit for 5 minutes and grill it, and then you could serve the chili in it. Okay, a little more interesting presentation maybe. Okay, so that's all those veg. Let's look at what else we've got. Chili, normally you would put in some beans. I got some black beans, pinto, which is the most typical, and some chickpeas or garbanzo beans. I just mix them all together like so in a mix, and that's going to be fine. We also, sometimes you will see corn, so I've got some regular kernel corn. These may be vegetables that were on sale, or you had them left over in the freezer from another meal. And again, chili, what a great opportunity to use it up. I had these sauteed peppers, sausage and peppers, but they were left over, so I stuck them in the freezer, thawed them out for this dish. Obviously, peppers are great in chili. We can do that. I will mention the tomato product. I didn't have any fresh tomatoes, but I used a couple different, petite diced canned tomatoes, whole tomatoes. You could use tomato sauce, I suppose, if you want. But some tomato product in chili is obviously appropriate. Let's assemble. Okay, so when we go to the range, a common error when people are starting a recipe is they don't let the utensil, the pan, get hot enough. If you, and there's some oil in this pot, if you just start throwing the food in before it's heated up, the food is going to absorb that warm oil. It's not going to sear. It's going to be very difficult to get that pot back up to temperature. So almost to smoking, then we can add what I would call the harder vegetables. Onion, peppers, we'll throw that broccoli in there, celery, but it's getting to a point where I would give it another stir. And you can hear that noise will pick back up and get louder. And that's what you want. You want that loud hiss, and then it's going to die down, and it's going to tell you, oops, it's time for the next step. So we got those things in there. I would now add the softer vegetables. Oops, don't want to forget the garlic. That can go in right now. Then we'll throw in that zucchini, the corn, and the mushroom. I chopped a little extra. I'm going to keep some of that out. Don't touch it yet. We want to bring it back up to heat, get it loud again, then we'll give it a stir. Sorry, we also had, remember we had some peppers left in the freezer. We're going to use those. They were just a sauteed pepper. While that's heating up a little bit, I just want to show you earlier, I had some rice. Again, this was on sale. And in there, I had, these are chipotle peppers that were really dried out. They were in the cupboard for a while. So typically you would hydrate those in warm water, get them pulpy, and usually process them down and strain it and all that. But I just threw it in the rice water for flavor and left it whole. Again, getting a little something out of it. We won't eat that, but that, of course, now that it's done its job, will go in the compost and not be wasted in landfill. Meanwhile, the vegetables have sauteed enough where I would go ahead and I laid out a bunch of spices. Here I've got cumin, dark chili powder, and I'm going to just quickly, I know about what I want. The more you play with the spices and get experience, you'll be able to look at how much volume do I have. Okay, I know about how much cumin I want for this whole bag. Chili powder. Don't be shy. Turmeric. Turmeric adds a beautiful color, and it's kind of it's a little bit nutty, almost buttery sometimes. Cinnamon. Cincinnati chili has a little cinnamon. I'm putting it in. Crushed red pepper, to taste. I don't know how spicy you like it. Putting the spices in this step is very important because their flavors tend to be oil-based. So if you put them in the saute, it's what we call blooming the spice. You're going to get more flavor and more color out of it. So now is the time to add spice, not herbs like oregano. If you want to use oregano, basil, bay leaf, stuff like that, needs to go into moisture, water, acid, like if you're adding tomato sauce, that's when you would put those herbs in. So now we're going to get this in there and let it toast a little bit in the hot pan. That'll keep working. The next thing you would put in to do what we call deglaze. Now is when you incorporate your tomato product. And we'll do it all. We can do it all. Now you can see when you stir it, that's going to deglaze the pot. You'll see the pot will start to get clean on the bottom, like so. You're getting all that flavor off of there, and you're frying out some of the acid of that tomato and making it a little sweeter. Okay, so we're frying out the acid of the tomato, we're deglazing the pot, and at this point, all we have left are the beans, or the bean mixture. Now, we use canned. I encourage you to use dried beans for a couple of reasons. One, better cost effectiveness, you know, they're inexpensive. You aren't buying a lot of canning liquid, which I would not put in the recipe, so that gets wasted, dumped out. Rinse off the beans and you put them in the recipe. So if you use dried beans, you skip that whole step, and you're buying beans by the pound for beans, not beans and liquid. So we'll throw those beans in there. Like so. And this, just because of what we put together and what we used, this could actually handle some liquid. That's about a cup, so that you get a little more of a slurry, like so. And make sure I like to take it and stir it up on the edge of the pot, because you don't want all that stuff that sticks to the pot. That's good flavor. So you want to capture all that, like so. And then, if we may, through the power of pre-preparation, we can take out this one that has had some time to cook, and you know, those flavors have had a chance to get together, like so. And I just want to show you real quick, if we take that mushroom cap, now that would normally be grilled, but I just want to show you that if you had the mushroom cap, I would just take a bit of that rice, you know, fill up the cap like so, and then, excuse me, and you can go right on the rice with your chili. And that's what we did with some leftover chow. So now we've made our chili. Maybe we've had dinner, we've had some friends over, but we made so much. And you know, we're definitely not going to waste this chili. So, hey, I could eat it again tomorrow. So we'll take a smaller container, and in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and do this, but you would want this cooler going into the plastic. But, so we put this, I mean, this is generous. You know, we have, could fit almost a couple cups in there. This isn't cooled yet, so I'm going to leave the lid off. We want this about just sitting out in the room until it drops down to 70 degrees or so. Then we can cover it, throw it in the fridge, chill it down to 38 or whatever your fridge is set for, and you're all set for lunch. Or at that point you could freeze it. But please never go with something warm directly into the freezer. You're going to have issues with that. Basically what happens is it'll freeze on the outside, which actually will insulate what's left at the core, and you're going to get some bacterial pathogenic growth, and it won't be the happy moment when you have it for lunch next week. So you've got that one, or if you're just going to sock it all in the freezer, again, you'd fill this up But this has to be cooled to the appropriate temperature before before it goes in the refrigerator, B, refrigerated fully before it goes in the freezer. And if you can, find the container that's as close in volume as you need for what it is you're storing. And that's it. Happy cooking.
I see the clapping hands in the chat. Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for that wonderful demonstration.
My pleasure. However painful it is to watch yourself one more time, I got through it.
Yes, you did.
So yeah, please, any questions?
Yes, now it is time for question and answers. So please put your questions into the chat. I think that's going to be the kind of the most orderly way so that we don't risk not being able to hear someone if two people are talking at the same time. But we'd love to hear what you learned, what was new for you, or any other insights, any other questions that you have, or if there was anything that was unclear. Talking a little bit to fill up space so that you can have time to type.
Or maybe everybody's ready to just go eat some chili,
Yeah, I'm a little hungry too. Okay, so I'm gonna scooch us on, since it doesn't seem like there are any questions. I'm gonna move us to the post-webinar survey. If anybody has questions come up as we're doing this, feel free to continue entering those in. For this last survey, I am gonna, since we do have just a few folks joining us today, if you do want to go ahead and unmute yourselves and answer, what is something that you learned that you didn't know before? And we'll start with that question first. And I'd love to hear from everybody. What is something that you learned today that you didn't know before?
It's Vicky. I didn't realize pepper skins were so tough and it can dull your knife. I thought that was interesting.
That is something that I learned from Peter's demonstration too when we were filming it a few weeks ago.
Yeah, a lot of vegetable and fruit skins are actually pretty tough material. If you were to take that and stack it like an inch deep, you'd realize how tough it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping the best way to deal with it obviously is keeping your knives sharp. There's a lot of I wish I had thought to grab it, but there's some very inexpensive knife sharpeners out there. One looks like sort of like a handle with a little guard under your fingers, and it's just got some carbide steel that's in the shape of a V. Very efficient, very inexpensive, and you don't need to use it all the time, but it's a good way to touch up the blades. I think they're $5 or $6 at most restaurant supply places.
Peter, I'll jump in. I think you just gave me the tip for the night for me.
Oh, the sharpener?
Yes.
Yeah, I have so many, people have gifted me all these elaborate knife sharpeners, and I haven't found anything I like as much as that. One, it fits in a toolkit, so when I was an active chef, I could carry it around. But yeah, they are very effective, and when you drag it over a dull knife, it has no resistance. It feels very smooth because you're dragging that V. It would be actually like that. You're dragging that V over a blade that's rounded. So if you can picture that, you've got a straight V that's hitting the shoulder of a dull blade, so it slides very easily. So you basically drag that on the blade until it gets the edge, and now it's going to feel like it's dragging. You're going to have a lot of resistance because now you understand what I'm saying? It's got all that friction on the edge instead of just dragging along on a very small spot. So it's easy to tell when the blade is sharp using one of those. And then of course you use the steel when, the steel where you're just honing it and keeping it sharp, but those don't work to sharpen a blade.
Mm-hmm. Jean in the chat wants to know if there's any particular brand of sharpener you recommend, Peter.
I don't know. Those, like I say, those are very inexpensive. I mean, at hotel shows and restaurant shows, they'll give them away.
Yeah, and I also, I think just being kind of a public authority, I don't think we're really allowed to recommend any brands.
Oh, yeah. No, they would be, I mean, everybody makes them, but it's because really it's just those two little pieces of carbon steel. Everything else is just a plastic handle, and or you can go out and spend, I don't know, I think it's Cuisinart makes an electric diamond sharpener for $95 or whatever it is, and fine, works perfectly fine, but I'm not a fan of needless spending.
Yeah, that seems a little extra.
Yeah, I'm a very basic kind of guy. So gadgetry, I'm not that into gadgetry. There's a couple of things that are great. I do use a stick blender, a vertical blender. Those are great.
I always called those boat motors.
Yeah.
From those who haven't had a chance to answer yet, what was something that you learned today that you didn't know before? About the pepper skins as well. Yeah. So what, question for everybody, what are you most excited to try? And you can feel free to click that little microphone to unmute yourselves and answer that. Nobody's excited. We've just
No, I'm excited as Vicki. I compost a lot of my excess stuff, skins and things like that, but I'm excited to put some in a bag and try to make some vegetable broth out of it. I think that's a great idea.
All right,
yeah,
great.
that's a great habit, and you can also do it with, of course, if you're not vegan, you can do it with bones and meat scraps and so forth. If you just keep something like that rolled up in the freezer and you add to it until you have enough to do something with it. It doesn't really matter if you have, a grilled chicken breast, a roasted chicken breast, sauteed or whatever. If you're making soup, you just want some cubed up chicken. So those are good habits if you can keep your freezer organized, like most of us struggle with. But it is, especially diced vegetables, that is something I do regularly. That it's really just so nice to be able to reach in, grab a baggie, and you have, diced onions, celery, peppers, whatever it is, to throw into a recipe when you're in a hurry.
And Jean asked, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, asked if she can bring compost to OCRRA. And yes, OCRRA has 2 compost sites that residents can bring food scraps to. Either whichever one you drop off food scraps at, they end up at Amboy and Camillus. And it is a $25 pass for the year, and then you're able to drop off an unlimited amount of food and yard waste for the year, and you also get to take home 2 bags of our compost with you when you get that pass. Paul says that his household transitioned from kids to empty nest, and the greatest challenge has been adjusting the food purchasing and storing accordingly. Absolutely. I live on my own, and it can be really challenging grocery shopping when everything is kind of like sold at the grocery store in portions meant to be eaten by a family, with kids and a large group. So it's definitely, it's a little easier for me because I don't mind eating the same thing every day. But if that's not what you're into, it can be really tricky to manage your grocery shopping to keep things fresh.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add there is sometimes you can, for the same price, go to the butcher if there is a live butcher behind the case. And a lot of those meats will be on display that you can buy one piece or a half a pound in smaller quantities, as long, if you just have to ask for it and wait for it to be wrapped up. But those are, that is an option that I think people sometimes forget about.
And if you're buying produce out of the produce section, if you have reusable produce bags, that is wonderful. If you are getting the produce bags that they have there, those are a type of plastic called film plastic, which is recyclable outside of a Wegmans or outside of a Target or any of those sorts of like big box stores. But it's very important that film plastics, plastic bags, and things like that are never put into your curbside recycling. Which is a little bit off topic for today, but since we're talking about the butcher and the produce section of the store, I wanted to bring that up. Anything else anybody is excited to try? Is anybody going to try the egg test? Jean says yes.
Yeah,
good. I'm glad that's helpful.
That is interesting. I haven't run into an old egg in a long time.
Yeah, you'll sort of see, the ones that are real fresh will completely sink, and then as they're kind of starting to age, they start to kind of stand up on end before they start fully floating when they're not good anymore. All right, well, thank you everybody so much for attending. If you come up with any further questions, feel free to reach out to myself or to Krishana, and I'm going to include Peter's information again in the chat for everyone. Peter P. Ricardo at foodbankcny.org. And thank you again. Like I said, if you have any other questions that come up, you can reach us all at those addresses. And happy cooking, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.